In the history of modern music, certain bass lines define entire eras. A single groove can influence generations of musicians. And in the early 1970s, one bassist helped reshape the sound of jazz, funk, and fusion forever. His name was Paul Jackson, a musician known for his deep pocket, inventive rhythms, and fearless creativity. Jackson was the bassist behind one of the most famous jazz-funk grooves ever recorded, the legendary track Chameleon. But his influence goes far beyond a single song. From his groundbreaking work with Herbie Hancock to his decades of innovation in jazz-funk, Paul Jackson became one of the most respected bass players in music history. This is the story of the man who helped invent the groove of modern jazz-funk. Before we continue, subscribe now, like this video, comment, and share. Paul Jackson was born on March 28, 1947, in Oakland, California. Oakland in the 1950s and 1960s was a vibrant musical environment, filled with jazz, rhythm and blues, and soul music. From an early age, Jackson showed an unusual interest in music. He began playing bass at the age of 9 years old. Before focusing entirely on bass guitar, he also studied piano and bassoon as a child. His musical talent developed quickly. By the age of 14, Jackson had already performed with the Oakland Symphony Orchestra, a remarkable achievement for a young musician. This early classical training would later influence his musical vocabulary. Even when playing deep funk grooves, Jackson's understanding of harmony and musical structure was unusually advanced. After high school, Jackson continued developing his musical skills. He studied at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, where he deepened his understanding of composition and jazz performance. During this period, the musical world was changing rapidly. Jazz was evolving into new forms, and musicians were beginning to blend genres like funk, rock, and soul. Jackson found himself drawn to this new sound. Unlike traditional jazz bassists who focused primarily on upright bass, Jackson became fascinated with the possibilities of electric bass guitar. This decision would place him at the center of a new musical movement. In the early 1970s, jazz pianist Herbie Hancock was looking for a new direction. After years of performing acoustic jazz, Hancock wanted to create a band that fused jazz improvisation with the energy of funk. In 1973, he formed a new group. The band was called the Headhunters. The lineup included Herbie Hancock, keyboards, Benny Maupin, saxophone and clarinet, Harvey Mason, drums, Bill Summers, percussion, Paul Jackson, bass. This group would soon create one of the most important albums in jazz history. In 1973, the band released the album Headhunters. The record fused jazz improvisation, funk rhythm, electronic keyboards, deep groove-based bass lines. The album was an enormous success. It became the first jazz album to sell more than 1 million copies. For many listeners, it introduced an entirely new sound, jazz funk. And at the center of that sound was Paul Jackson's bass. The opening track of the album was a song called Chameleon. The track begins with one of the most famous grooves in music history, a hypnotic funk bass line that repeats and evolves across the entire song. Paul Jackson co-wrote the piece. The groove became instantly recognizable. For bass players, it became a rite of passage. And for the music world, it marked the birth of a new genre. The track would later become a jazz standard, performed and studied by musicians worldwide. Paul Jackson's bass style was unique. Instead of simply repeating patterns, he constantly interacted with the band. His playing combined funk rhythm, jazz improvisation, melodic creativity. Herbie Hancock once explained that Jackson rarely repeated the same bass line twice during improvisation. This made every performance feel alive. The bass was no longer just a supporting instrument. It became part of the conversation. After the success of Headhunters, the band continued recording. Jackson played on several classic albums with Hancock, including Thrust, 1974, Man-Child, 1975, Flood, 1975, Secrets, 1976. Each album expanded the jazz-funk sound even further. Songs like Actual Proof and Spank-A-Lee showcased Jackson's ability to create complex, driving grooves. His partnership with drummer Mike Clark became one of the most famous rhythm sections in fusion music. Eventually, the band began recording independently as the Headhunters, releasing albums without Hancock. Two of their most famous records were Survival of the Fittest, 1975, Straight from the Gate, 1977. One song from this era, God Make Me Funky, would later be heavily sampled in hip-hop music. Artists from De La Soul to NWA used parts of the recording in their tracks. This meant Jackson's bass grooves helped shape not only jazz and funk, but hip-hop as well. In 1978, Jackson released his first solo album, Black Octopus. The album featured contributions from his Headhunters bandmates and showcased his musical versatility. Over the following decades, he continued releasing albums including Funk on a Stick, Groove or Die, Conjunction, with Mike Clark. Each project continued exploring the deep grooves and improvisational freedom that defined his style. In the mid-1980s, Jackson moved to Japan. He remained active as a performer and educator. One of his most important initiatives was a project called Jazz for Kids. The program aimed to introduce students in Japan to the history of jazz and African American culture. For Jackson, music was not only about performance, it was about sharing culture and history. Paul Jackson continued recording and performing well into the 21st century. His influence remained strong among bass players and jazz musicians. Sadly, on March 18, 2021, Jackson passed away in Japan at the age of 73. The news spread quickly through the music community. Tributes came from musicians around the world because many knew what Jackson's music represented: innovation, groove, and musical courage. Paul Jackson helped redefine what the electric bass could do. He blended funk rhythm with jazz improvisation. He created grooves that still inspire musicians today. And through albums like Headhunters, he helped invent the sound of jazz funk. Decades later, bass players still study his lines, still learn his grooves, still try to capture the magic he brought to every performance. Because when Paul Jackson played bass, the groove didn't just support the music, it became the music. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. See you in the next video.